from the Signature Bank Studios. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Former Scotland First Minister Humza Yousaf, he's a big multiculturalist, open borders guy. He likes to, bitch about too many white people here and too many white people there, even though he was elevated to First Minister in Scotland by the very same population he sort of implicitly criticizes as white supremacists. But okay. He had this to say. I mean, he's gone out against Elon Musk, and Elon Musk is a danger to comity in Western Europe because of his statements on open borders policies. Yousaf had this to say recently about this quote-unquote anti-immigrant sentiment in Europe. It's not anti-immigrant, just like it's not here. It's anti-open borders. It's anti-mass immigration, no vetting, no real vetting possible, and all of the societal ills that come with that because you don't have a sensible immigration policy. That's not anti-immigrant. That's pro-common sense. But here's his diatribe on the topic.
That 99% of the meetings I go to, I'm the only non-white person in the room.
But why you cut me open, and I'm about as Scottish as you come. But the truth of the matter is, I don't know whether the future for me and my wife and my 3 children is going to be here in Scotland or the United Kingdom, or indeed in Europe and the West, because I have for some time really worried about the rise of Islamophobia. I wrote a column about it actually just about a month ago, the rise of the far right driven by Islamophobia in Europe, UK, and the West. And we are now seeing the culmination of, not years actually, decades of anti-migrant, anti-Muslim rhetoric being normalized in the political discourse, now playing out in the most horrendous, violent way possible. And that genuinely makes me question whether or not my family has an existence here in the UK or not. And by the way, I'm not the only one. I've had hundreds of messages from the Muslim community saying the exact same thing.
Yeah, I don't know what that means. There's not specifics there. There's just general, we're under threat, and there's Islamophobia, the general accusation, so you don't need to provide specific evidence in support. But I do have this. I have the UN Undersecretary for Counterterrorism, hardly a tool of the right. The UN Undersecretary for Counterterrorism saying the ISIS-K threat regrettably has become manifest in Vienna and is considered the greatest external terrorist threat to the continent. The greatest external threat to the continent, ISIS' reemergence in the wake of this terrorist plot in Vienna at a Taylor Swift concert that was thwarted. So it's not Islamophobia. It's vigilance in the face of Islamofascists like those terrorists in ISIS or other terrorist organizations. Hamas, for example, in the Middle East, Hezbollah, and so on and so forth. But of course, people like Yousaf intentionally conflate the two so they can don the cloak of the victim, which of course is all-powerful in the West. For more on the topic and many others, there is much going on in the international arena. We're pleased to be joined by Stephen Bucci, who served America for 3 decades as an Army Special Forces officer and top Pentagon official, and is a visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Steve, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Oh, it's always my pleasure. Thank you for having me back on the show.
So what about that? I mean, not just Yousaf's comments. Those are not particularly original, but the against the backdrop of this sort of emerging or re-emerging threat posed by radical Islamist terrorist groups like ISIS.
Well, that that threat is real. It's frankly never gone away. It kind of waned for a little while. Now it's back in full force. Frankly, greatly enabled by people who portray the situation as, oh, poor us, we're the victims here in the evil West who's so racist and Islamophobic, and it's all on them. But then if you look at the coverage of the events going on in the streets in these Western countries, in the UK, in France, the only people who are doing damage, who are attacking other people, who are screaming for jihad or global intifada, are the Islamo-fascists, as you just pointed out, and they get a pass. The police don't touch them. They don't arrest them. They just, you need to back off a little bit. You're offending them by you being here, holding up a sign that may say, I support Israel, or, I support my own country, that you are in this, in your demonstration, you're saying needs to be torn down. So suddenly having any opinion that disagrees with these folks, you become a criminal. And in the UK in particular, with the new government, it is really scary that some of the things that they're claiming to do. I don't know if you guys saw it, but over the weekend, a high-ranking police official in the UK said that he was going to start indicting Americans who said things online and demanding that they be extradited to be prosecuted in UK if they said anything that was what we would consider woke or politically correct, or politically incorrect, excuse me. If they did not say things that were woke or politically correct, then they would be prosecuted. It's like, wait a minute, we don't even live in your country, and that's what the police officials, not some guy in the street, but officials of these countries. There is something seriously wrong internally with many of our European allies right now, and it's tied to the proliferation of not just immigration, but immigration of radical Islamists, the political kind. I'm not talking religion here. That's a political position. They are using the freedom and the openness of the West and the United States to push a radical Islamist agenda.
Well, and in the United States, too, I mean, just to fold the United States in, we have some of the same problems as you were sort of alluding to. For example, Chuck Grassley wants to know how a lookout qualified person of interest from Iran who was part of an assassination plot against Donald Trump was allowed into this country, because this guy was this is an official designation, as you know, but lookout qualified person of interest. He was still granted parole by the feds to come into this country, and he was part of an assassination plot against Trump.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they are so over the top sensitive to these folks that they all get a pass. It doesn't matter how much evidence we seem to have of their malintent in doing something evil here in our country or in these other Western countries. So they just, but we can't touch them. They're now a privileged class who they can say or do whatever they want. And other people who might be patriots in their country, they're suddenly the problem.
Like Tulsi Gabbard, who's being followed around by federal law enforcement, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, and she was an icon of the anti-gun community, at least, which is generally on the left. After her shooting, they treated her not just as a victim of the crime, but as a symbol of the need to disarm the American public and to get rid of the Second Amendment. Her husband.
No, we're talking Tulsi Gabbard.
No. Tulsi Gabbard, not Gabby Giffords.
I'm sorry.
The story about Tulsi Gabbard and federal marshals following her around when she travels.
Yeah, correct. I'm sorry. I got my brain got ahead and my mouth kept up with it. You're right. Here's a woman who had been a member of Congress. The left didn't like her because she suddenly, said, "Wait a minute, you guys are too far gone. I'm going to have to switch my positions," and she becomes a target. That's wrong. That is the weaponization of our justice system, our Justice Department. It's just crazy. She has not said anything anywhere that I have read that would even be vaguely seditious. She's an American patriot. She served this country in uniform, and she has a platform because she's a former Democrat who is now speaking in a different direction, and that scares the heck out of the left because she doesn't fit the profile that they have defined for a female Democrat.
Well, yeah, she had the audacity to tell the truth that, she said that Kamala Harris would essentially be a mouthpiece and puppet to the military-industrial complex. And the next day, July 23rd, boom, they retaliated against her.
Yeah, it's sad, it's wrong, and it has to stop.
Well, somebody's going to have to stop it because it's not going to stop itself. That's pretty clear. Just speaking of Iran, military exercises in Western Iran, are we spoiling for the Iranian-Israeli war here in the near term?
It's probably several things. One, I'd rather see the Iranians doing exercises than shooting missiles and drones at Israel. I think, though, this may be their fallback position. I think they were preparing to do another physical attack. So remember the last time it didn't work out so well for them. It was a massive failure. And I think the Israelis somehow reminded them of the last time they did it. The quote retaliation that Israel chose was completely symbolic. They blew up a facility in a very secure area that really was kind of meaningless, but basically sent the message, if we could get this place, we can get a lot of other places too. So back off.
Right, but I mean, I know they obviously have to contemplate Israel first and foremost, but they must be looking at America and feeling like whatever's going on there, that you've got a government on autopilot, not paying particularly close attention to us, and also taking a relatively dovish position towards us too. Maybe now's the time to strike as opposed to later.
Well, and that's the dangerous part, because you and I don't know what the Biden-Harris administration's position is towards Israel. It kind of changes day to day. It gets weaker every time they change back and forth. Surely the Iranians don't know. But if they make the wrong guess and say, well, this is the chance to do it, then Israel is in much more danger than they should be. The deterrence message towards Iran from the United States needs to be clear and unambiguous and powerful to let them know that if they do this, they're going to pay a price inside Iran from the Israelis, from America, and from the Sunni Arab countries around them. They're not getting that message yet, mainly because the Biden administration, if that's anywhere in their thought process, they're not letting anybody know about it, other than the movement of the fleet into the vicinity. That's a good move, but not necessarily a sufficient one.
All right, another problem area, Venezuela. Wall Street Journal reporting over the weekend that there have been secret talks between the United States government and the Venezuelan government to get Maduro to abdicate with the promise of amnesty if he does. What's your reaction to that?
I don't know if that's true. I can't believe the Biden administration has enough chutzpah to do that, or that Maduro would think it was a credible negotiation. I would love to see Maduro out of office. I don't think giving that man amnesty is appropriate. He has killed his own citizens. He has been a complete and utter dictator since he got into office, and he's a bad person. I think we should say, all right, if he walks out, we won't prosecute him internationally, but the Venezuelan people, you get to prosecute them. Giving him complete amnesty, I think, is wrong.
Yeah, I mean, what if maybe we could just give him free college tuition like we do any other illegal immigrant?
Well, in Minnesota, yes.
Yeah, maybe that would be.
Help him open up a business, that'd be okay.
Yeah. Hey, so since you were Army Special Forces, I feel compelled to ask for your expert opinion on the Walls military service controversy. I mean, is this a case of stolen valor?
It's complicated. One part, the thing about him not deploying with his unit, it's a couple parts. Bear with me. I'll get to the gist of your question in just a second. He served 20 years. At the 20-year mark, they had gotten the notification about the deployment. He put in retirement papers, and they let him retire. That, while it bothers me as a leader to see a senior NCO do that right before deployment, if he was that critical to the unit, they would have done a thing called a stop loss. They would have said, sorry, your papers are rejected. You're required for this upcoming event. You have to stay and go with the unit. They didn't do that. So obviously the superiors thought, okay, he's retired. Let him get out of here. He's not worth that much anyway.
Yeah.
The other
that's
part
believable.
That's really bothersome is the number of times he's talked about being in Afghanistan in combat, carrying a combat weapon. All of that stuff are utter lies. And that is stolen valor. That is portraying himself. Now, look, he served supposedly honorably for 20 years in the Guard. I have no problem with that. I've worked with Guard people extensively, both when I was in uniform and out. They're great folks for the most part. But if you didn't do what you are saying you did, that's wrong, particularly for a senior NCO who's supposedly a leader. So that needs to be shouted from the rooftops that this man in a position of political power got there in large part by lying about his military record. And to my knowledge, he hasn't said, you're right, I exaggerated, I apologize. I mean, at least Hillary Clinton in her book, when she talked about getting mortared in Sarajevo, said, well, yeah, I may have misremembered that. No, you lied, but okay, at least she admitted that it was incorrect. This guy hadn't done that either.
Oh, he's not going to either.
I wanted to get your take on one more thing. There's so many theaters we have to go through here, but Ukrainian forces advanced across western parts of Russia's Kursk region, a surprise attack that led Russia to evacuate parts of a second region next to Ukraine after Kyiv sharply increased military activity near the border just days after its biggest incursion into sovereign Russian territory since the start of the war. So what does that tell us about the state of that war between Russia and Ukraine? I mean, is Ukraine still hanging in there? Are those death throes? What do you think?
I would love to say it's showing that Ukraine is still full up and ready to go and is now taking the war to the aggressors. I'm concerned that there could be an element of desperation here. They are, running out of steam, running out of motivation within the country, and they're trying to, by taking the war back to the Russians, they're trying to stir up that motivation again among their own people, and we won't know that yet. I don't know which one of those two possibilities it is, but I have to tell you, I'm not sad that Russia is at least finally paying a direct price for their aggressive behavior. I feel badly for the Russian citizens that have been hurt. From what I understand, though, the one missile that hit a civilian building wasn't aimed at that. It was shot down by the Russians en route to whatever the target really was, and it landed on top of the building and hurt the civilians. So right now, at least the Ukrainians are not doing what the Russians were doing to them, which is directly targeting clear civilian targets like apartment buildings and shopping malls. But we'll have to see where this goes in the next couple of weeks.
Stephen Bucci served America for 3 decades as Army Special Forces, an officer, as well as a top Pentagon official. Now a visiting fellow in the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Stephen, thank you as always.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me. And sorry about the misrepresentation of the
No worries.
lady.
It's going on your permanent record. There's nothing we can do about it now.
Man, I tell you, that was a bad one.
That's all right. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
This message is for anyone looking for $500,000 to $1 million or more of affordable term life insurance, even if you have diabetes, high blood pressure, or taking anxiety meds. Here's an example. If you're a 50-year-old male, maybe overweight with type 2 diabetes, $1 million of term life insurance may only cost about